So, gentlemen, thank you again for being here this morning. We are in Genesis chapter 30 today. So we left off last week at chapter 30, verse 25. That's what we'll pick up today. And we'll likely have time to roll into chapter 31. So I'm not quite sure how far we'll get into chapter 31 or through 31 because it's not a short chapter. Actually, Genesis chapter 30, verse 25 is a good breaking place. So we're actually going to pick up there. And where we normally read through the entire chapter to provide proper context, I think we're okay today to go ahead and start our reading in at verse 25. I did want to do just a quick synopsis of last week and where we were. So if you recall, last week in chapter 29, Jacob completed his journey from Beersheba all the way up to Paddan Aram and to the town of Haran. Now, what is Paddan Aram? Paddan Aram is a region, and Haran is a town. So Haran is the town that is in the region of Paddan Aram. And so if you've seen Paddan Aram, and we've read Paddan Aram in the passages, that's what that's about. As I showed last week, Haran is just over the border, just above Syria, between the borders or just past the borders of Syria and Turkey. And, that really is the cradle of civilization, the Fertile Crescent right there, today from Turkey into Iraq and Iran. That's where this whole area of Sum, the Chaldeans, the area of that's all where that takes place is northern Syria and southern Turkey. What would we would know of them today? So then after he finishes his journey to Haran, he goes to the same well that Abraham's servant went and met Rebekah, and Jacob sees Rachel for the first time at that well. And then Rachel runs to her father Laban and announces that Jacob, a member of their family, is here. And Laban runs out to greet Jacob and invites him back. And then after staying in Laban's home for about a month, Laban says, there's no reason for you to not make money while you're here. Come work for me. And how much would you like to be paid? And that's where Jacob says, well, I don't have any money. But I'll work for you for 7 years if I can marry your daughter, Rachel. And Laban agrees, and Jacob works the 7 years, and Jacob comes to Laban and says, hey, I've fulfilled my end of the bargain of our agreement. It's time. I need to marry Rachel. Laban says, no problem. And he schedules a feast, and they have, a wedding. And his bride is brought in veiled into the marriage tent. And when Jacob wakes up in the morning, it's Leah. That's not Rachel. Uncle Laban did a switch, and realizing that he'd been hoodwinked, Jacob in the morning says, Uncle Laban, what gives? Why did you do this to me? I'm now married to Leah, because he consummated the marriage. Back then, the process of a wedding was typically a feast, and then consummating the marriage in intercourse was actually the service that constituted marriage. So Jacob is now in a tough spot. He has made love to Leah, so she's technically his wife, but he's in love with Rachel. So Laban says, work for me for another 7 years. I'll give you Rachel. One of the guys commented that they didn't realize, they thought that Jacob had to work another 7 years before he could marry Rachel. But actually what Laban says is, look, finish your marriage week with Leah, finish the week. And if you'll agree to work for me another 7 years, I'll give you Rachel. So he didn't have to wait but a week to marry Rachel. And as I pointed out in this week's email, the reason what was going on with Laban is Laban was a cheapskate. And he was trying to delay or get out of having to pay a dowry for his daughters. And Laban is a piece of work. And we've mentioned before that Jacob met his match. Conniving and scheming Jacob has met his match in his Uncle Laban. And Laban is even more of a schemer. And he's also a cheapskate. And we'll kind of see that a little bit when we are going through today's text. So Jacob agrees, marries Rachel also. Now he's got 2 wives. Laban gives each of his daughters a handmaiden, an assistant, a servant. And so Jacob is now got 2 wives. And ultimately, the servants are given to Jacob as concubines, so he'll end up having effectively 4 wives. And he works for Laban for another 7 years to fulfill that agreement. And that's basically where we pick up. We actually, picking up in completing out chapter 29 during the 7-year period, when Jacob is now married to both Leah and Rachel, they start building a family. And it turns out to be quite a big family. Matter of fact, there's 13 children, 12 boys and 1 girl. And the 12 boys establish, ultimately, the 12 tribes of Israel. So it's important. It's important. All right. So let's go to Genesis chapter 30, and let's start our read through at verse 25. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, "Send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I've found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He added, "Name your wages and I will pay them." Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household?" "What shall I give you?" he asked. "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied. "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled and spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages. And my honesty will testify for me in the future, whenever you check on the wages you have paid me. Any goat in my possession that is not speckled or spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored, will be considered stolen." "Agreed," said Laban. "Let it be as you have said." That day he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Jacob, however, took fresh-cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees, and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed the peeled branches in the water troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in the heat and came to drink, they made it in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob placed the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so that they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban and the strong ones to Jacob. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. All right, that's the rest of chapter 30, and it's interesting and a little bit strange story. So let's go back up to the top here and start to unpack it. Verse 25, after Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me on my ways so I can go back to my own homeland. So Jacob has now been gone from home a long time. So he hasn't seen his direct family in a long while. And he's homesick. He's ready to go home. He's ready to establish his own household. And he doesn't want to do it there in Haran. He wants to do it there back in Palestine. He wants to do it back in the area of Hebron and Beersheba. Rachel gives birth to Joseph. So Joseph, if you'll remember, is the youngest son of Jacob. So he's the last one born. And that's the thing that's significant about where verse 25 picks up. It's with the completion of Jacob's family, right? The youngest or the final, the last, the 13th child, the 12th son has been born. And so this is sort of, it's a done job. He's done building his family, and he's ready to take his family home, to his home. Jacob said to Laban, send me on my way so I can go back to my own homeland. I think that Jacob always felt like a foreigner when he was in Haran, that he didn't belong there. Where his heart was back home in Palestine. And that's kind of interesting because, Abraham, his grandfather, was a foreigner in Canaan, right? But it's all that Jacob had ever known before he left and made the journey to Haran. And so when he thought about his hometown or where he came from or where his roots were, it was back there. It was back in Beersheba. It was back in Hebron. So he's ready to take his family, lock, stock, and barrel. He's ready to take them home. And it's interesting that Jacob believes or feels that Laban is not going to allow him to take his wives and his children with him. And that's a non sequitur for Jacob. He must take them all. What's going on here? Well, Leah and Rachel are Laban's daughters, right? And so Jacob is thinking that Laban's going to have major heartburn over his daughters leaving and going to a strange land. Fortunately or unfortunately for Jacob, actually Laban was more concerned about losing the blessing, the benefit that he was getting, that he was receiving because of Jacob's work. And actually, what was going on was God was being faithful to what he had promised to first Abraham and then to Isaac and now to Jacob. When God, at the, with the dream of the ladder reaching from earth to heaven and God Almighty standing at the top of the ladder, what did God do? He affirmed and confirmed the promises made to Abraham and Isaac. He confirmed on Jacob. God has been faithful to those promises, and everything that Jacob has worked on for Laban has benefited Laban. Laban knows that. He doesn't want to lose that. He knows that he wouldn't be in the place that he is now if he didn't have Jacob. And that's what he's most worried about. He's not worried about losing daughters and grandchildren. He's worrying about losing Laban's blessing. Verse 26, give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. I like this verse, right? Because this is kind of the man's verse. What what Jacob is saying is the reason I'm still here, Laban, the reason that I'm still putting up with all of your stuff, the reason that I'm still working to profit you is because of my wives and my children. These are the most important thing to me. These must come with me. I need to go. I need to go home. I need to return to my homeland, and they must come with me. Give me my wives and my children for whom I have served you. They are the reason that Jacob has been serving Laban. And I will be on my way. He wants to make it, clean break. I'll be on my way. You know how much work I've done for you. The job that I have done for you speaks for itself. I've done a good job for you. You have no reason to think that I have not fulfilled my end of the bargain. Verse 27, Laban said to him, I have found favor in your eyes. Please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. Now that's really interesting, and it's strange. What does he mean by he has learned through divination? Well, remember where we are. We're in Haran. We're in Ur. We're in Mesopotamia, which is a pagan land. And Uncle Laban is a pagan. And Leah and Rachel grew up in a pagan home. And when he says divination, he means that he has used some, we don't know what, but some occult practice. And in doing so, he's learned that Laban is blessed because of Jacob. And Laban doesn't want to lose that. Today in Mesopotamia, in the archaeological digs, we have recovered many personal gods. And in most homes in Mesopotamia, there was a niche. And in this niche was a personal god, a small idol that was the idol of the family. And it's likely that Laban used this personal god or family god, this little idol, in some sort of practice, some sort of divination. And the result was that Laban learned that he was blessed because of Jacob. He says, I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you. And I think that that's interesting because truth is truth. He added, name your wages and I will pay them. Look, I want you to stay. I want you to keep working for me. Just tell me, how much is it you want to make? Right? Just name your price. Now, would Uncle Laban have paid Jacob just anything? Like if he would have said, well, I want $1 million. And he named a price that he knew that Laban would never pay. But in Laban's mind, he was starting a negotiation. So Jacob could have named anything, and Laban would have come back and negotiated. Well, But that's not what he did. Jacob said to him, you know how I have worked for you. You know the job I've done, the quality work that I have done. You know how I have profited you, and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. And it's true. God had blessed Laban through Jacob. God was blessing everything that Jacob's hand touched. He worked, but God blessed him through his work. I remember when I probably completed my first year at Comcast, and when I was hired, there was another project manager. He and I were cube mates. We sat back to back in these low cubes, and he was a little bitter, not towards me, well, maybe a little bit, but really not towards me, but towards the company because I was doing the job he believed he was hired to do. But then when he started with the company, he said, oh, no, we've got something different for you. because he didn't know it, but I was on my way. I had already completed the hiring process, and I was brought in specifically to manage projects for NBC, fiber optic projects for NBC. He thought that that was the job that he was supposed to have. After I'd been there about a year, he turns to me one day and he says, I don't know what it is, he says, but I can't do better than you. You're special. And I knew at the time, I knew that God had given me that job at Comcast, or given me this job, because I still have the same job at Comcast, and that he was blessing me in my work. And that was what was going on here with Jacob, is that God was blessing his work. Jacob still had to work. It was tiring. It was, he's doing the work of a shepherd. It was hard work, but God was blessing Jacob through his work. And Laban was the beneficiary of that. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when may I do something for my own household? I had to get the inflection right. But now, when may I do something for my own household? What shall I give you? He asked. Again, Laban is coming back with, name your price. What do you want? What do you want? Jacob responds, don't give me anything. Because Jacob knows that everything that Laban pays him, gives him, comes with strings attached. Jacob could have said, well, make me a partner in this ranch and make me part of the profit sharing program. But Jacob didn't want anything. He wanted to have no strings attached. He wanted a clean break with Uncle Laban when he went back home. Don't give me anything, Jacob replied, but if you will do this one thing for me, let me go home, take my wives and children with me. I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all your flocks today and remove from them every speckled, spotted sheep, or every dark-colored lamb, or every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on the wages you have paid me, any goat in my possession that is not speckled, spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored will be considered stolen. All right, what's going on here? Well, this is actually quite a clever proposition. He's basically saying, look, you can have all the purebred animals. You can have all the white lambs. You can have all of the single-colored sheep. No mottled fur or wool. No speckled, no streaks. Those become mine. And same with the goats, right? I'll take all the black lambs. So the white lambs were considered to be better because they produced white wool, which was easier to make into textiles and clothing. And by the way, I think it's kind of interesting. I've been reading about Sumerian culture and the time of the patriarchs, and those from Palestine wore mostly wool garments. You think, oh my gosh, it's so hot there. How could they stand wearing wool garments? Well, it was a very loose weave, so it allowed a lot of airflow. And the people didn't wear underwear. The concept of underwear evidently didn't exist then. So there was a lot of airflow. So that's how they could do that, because it was a very open weave with the wool. So the wool was very important. And it's what, people's wealth at the time was measured by the size of their flocks, the size of their herds. Why? Because they were resources. They were food, but then they were also used for textiles. Did you know when, we think about or we read about a person in mourning in biblical times, what do? Throw ashes on their head, right? And they wear sackcloth. What is sackcloth? It is fabric made out of goat's hair or camel hair. Okay. Well, it's rough and it's scratchy. It's not soft like wool. And so that was an outward expression of the mourning, the inner turmoil that they were experiencing. So if you made a garment out of goat hair or camel hair, it was itchy and difficult to wear. Okay, so Jacob is saying, let me take, you have all the purebred animals. And in theory, that would mean that Laban would get the strongest of the animals, the ones most likely to live longer and procreate the most, in theory. So Jacob is saying, look, you take all of the, I'll take as my wages all of the animals that are streaked, speckled, the less than perfect animals. Those will become my wages. And look, this is going to make it easy, because if you find any lamb, ram, sheep, goat, anyone that has any speckling, any white, any streaks, if you find anyone in my herd that is a solid color, you'll know that it's been stolen from your herd. So this is pre-branding, right? But this was an easy way to tell what was Laban's and what was Jacob's. What is Jacob after? What is his motivation? He wants to start building his own personal wealth. And this proposition will allow Jacob to start building his own herds. Look, Uncle Laban, I'll take all the ones that are speckled, spotted, mottled, streaked. I'll take all of those animals as my pay. You can have all the others, all the solid colors. Verse 33, and my honesty will testify for me in the future, whenever you check on the wages you have paid me. Any goat in my possession that is not speckled, spotted, or any lamb that is not dark colored will be considered stolen. Agreed, said Laban. Let it be as you said. So Laban says, I'm thinking this is a good deal for me. I get to keep Jacob working for me. And yeah, okay, this works. Verse 35, that same day he removed, who? He, Laban. Ooh, watch what's going on here. That same day he removed all the male goats that had streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Uncle Laban pulled another fast one. He pulled another swindle. Even though he agreed to Jacob's terms, that same day he went and he took all the streaked or spotted or speckled sheep and goats and took them away, separated them out, and had Laban's sons, had them take them a 3-day journey away so that Jacob wouldn't see them. And so initially, the herds that Laban allowed Jacob to work had no streaked, spotted, or speckled animals because Laban had already gamed him and separated those out and moved them far enough away that Jacob wouldn't see them. 3-day journey away. Man, Uncle Laban, what a deceiver, what a conniving person. And remember, Uncle Laban is a pagan, right? He doesn't have the same God morality that Jacob grew up with. And part of this is the passage in Proverbs that says, train a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will return to it. It's an important distinction for Christian parents to understand that that passage isn't saying if you train a person or if you train a child in the way that they should go, that they'll always be a good kid. It doesn't say that. It says, and when they get old, they will return to it. They'll return to the way that they've been brought up. Godly parents attempting to raise their kids in a godly home are going to have kids that stray. But when they grow old and when they realize what's important to them and in their lives, they will return to God. Jacob has now been in Mesopotamia, in Padam Haram, in Haran for 20 years. And he is likely now pushing 40. And he's ready to go home. He's ready to go back to, return back to the promised land. Remember that it was Rebekah's plan for Jacob to go to her uncle Laban so that Esau would not kill Jacob. But God, that wasn't God's plan. It wasn't God's intention. But God was able to use that for his glory by giving Jacob a family and 12 sons that ultimately started the nation of Israel. But they gotta get home. It's time to go home. But Jacob can't get there immediately, and he wants to start building up his own wealth. So he's going to create his own herd here. Verse 37. Jacob, however, took fresh-cut branches from poplar, almond, and plane trees and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. He's what? Then he placed the peeled branches in the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. They mated in front of the branches, and they bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. Okay, what is this about? Jacob is under the incorrect understanding of genetics and animal husbandry. And he believes that by putting branches with streaks on them in front of the animals when they're mating will result in having lambs and calves that are speckled and streaked and spotted. It's incorrect. It's not how genetics works. But remember what's really going on here. God is still blessing Jacob. So even though Jacob has an incorrect understanding about how you would create or generate streaked and spotted and speckled creatures, God is still blessing him, and his size of his herd increased. And he has streaked and speckled and spotted animals. Verse 40, Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself, and he did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches in the troughs in front of the animals so that they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban and the strong ones went to Jacob. Now, he might not have realized it, but now that makes genetic sense, right? So he takes the stronger animals and brings them together so that they'll mate and have stronger kids. And the weak ones he puts in Laban's flock. And they mate and they have weaker kids. So the weak animals went to Laban and the strong ones to Jacob. In this way, the men grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. Okay, so the wealth picture in those days, the complete wealth picture, if you talk about diversified investments, the diversification in that day was in flocks and in servants and camels and donkeys. So the more that you had of all of those things, the wealthier you were. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks, female and male servants, camels and donkeys. Tom, you have a question, comment?
Yeah, you mentioned at the beginning that Joseph was the end of the line, but actually Benjamin was to come. So he has 11 now.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
And that's in 35.
We haven't gotten there yet. Thank you. Appreciate it. Okay, so that is actually the end of chapter 30, and we can roll right into chapter 31. But thank you about Benjamin, yes. All right, so now, interesting thing happens. We'll do a quick read through of Genesis 31 here in a moment, but an interesting thing happens, and that is that Jacob becomes the victim of his own success. Okay? Jacob becomes the victim of his own success. Genesis chapter 31, verse 1. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all the wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude towards him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob, go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the field where his flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude towards me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have worked for your father with all my strength. Yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, the streaked ones were your wages, then the flocks bore streaked young. So God had taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see, all the male goats mating in the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing for you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. Then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you. Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and they drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods that he had accumulated in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had and crossed the Euphrates River and headed for the hill country of Gilead. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream at night and said, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You've deceived me. You carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly and deceive me? Why didn't you tell me so that I could send you away with joy and singing and music of timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my granddaughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you. But last night, God, the God of your father, said to me, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, good or bad.' Now, you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why steal my gods?" Jacob answered Laban, "I was afraid because I thought that you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me, and if so, take it." Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the tent of the two female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and had put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I am having my period." So he searched, but he could not find household gods. Jacob was angry, and he took Laban to task. "What is my crime?" he asked Laban. "How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods and you found that now that you searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of your relatives and mine, and let them judge between the two of us. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and your goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams of your flocks. I did not bring your animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your two daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac has not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you." Laban answered Jacob, "The women are my daughters, the children are my children, the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about your daughters of mine or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us." So Jacob took a stone and he set it up as a pillar. He said to his relatives, "Gather some stones." So they took the stones and they piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. Laban called it Jegur Shahadutha. There we go. And Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, "This heap is a witness between you and me today." This is why it was called Gilead. It was also called Mizpah, because he said, "May the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If I mistreat your daughters, or if you take if you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me." Laban also said to Jacob, "Here is this heap, and here is this pillar I have set between you and me. The heap is a witness, and the pillar is a witness that I will not go past this heap to your side to harm you, and that you will not go past this heap and the pillar to my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor and the God of their father judge between us. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. He offered a sacrifice there in the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them, and he left and returned home. That is the end of chapter 31. All right, let's go back up to the top here. A lot of drama. And Uncle Laban is still, a conniver, a schemer. He's more than a conniver and schemer than Jacob is. All right, verse 1. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying, Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father. And Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude towards him was not what it had been. All right, so what's going on here? Again, Jacob is now becoming the victim of his own success. And really, he's becoming the victim of God's blessing, to the point that Laban's sons and even Laban himself were becoming jealous of Jacob and how wealthy he's become. And the sons are intimating that Jacob has gotten wealthy on the back of Laban, off of Laban's back. Well, Jacob's worked his butt off. He's worked really hard for his Uncle Laban, and God has blessed him during this time. And that's how he became wealthy. But that's not what Laban's sons see. They see that Jacob has been gradually stealing the flocks away from their father, and that the only reason that Jacob is wealthy is because he's been stealing from Laban. And now Laban's attitude towards Jacob has changed. Where Laban wanted Jacob to be there, now he's jealous. He's jealous of Jacob and Jacob's success. And Jacob realizes this. Verse 3, Then the Lord said to Jacob, Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you. So Jacob now, previously he wanted to go home. He struck the deal with Laban so that he could begin to build his own flocks. But now God himself comes to Jacob and tells him, it's time to go home. And don't worry, I will be with you. What is God saying? God is saying, you're not going to leave your blessing behind. Your blessing is going to go with you. I'll still be there. I'll still be watching your back. I got your 6, and I'm still going to continue to bless you. Verse 4. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where the flocks were. He said to them, I see that your father's attitude towards me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, and yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. Okay, what's going on? So Jacob knows he's got to go home. He's going to take his wives and his children with him. He needs the support of his wives. In your marriage, you have probably not explained your thinking once or twice with your wife, not brought her into your plan, and you've decided that the best course of action is just to do, and she'll come along with. And that's not how women work. Women want to know. They want to understand why you're doing what you're doing. So Jacob is being smart, and he's asking his wives, Leah and Rachel, to meet him on the fields away from Laban where they can talk privately. And he can educate them. He can share the plan with them that they're going home to Palestine. No surprises. And because they are their father's daughters, I think Jacob is anticipating that they might have some resistance. That, even though Jacob's been talking now for 6 years that he wants to go home to Palestine, and the assumption is they're coming with him. he's assuming that there's going to be some resistance. And so he's got to sell them on this idea. So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. And he said to them, I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it had been before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I have worked for your father with all my strength. You know that I've been working hard for him. You know that I've had his best in mind in all that I do. Yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. How did he change his wages? His wages were sheep and goats. How did he change them? Well, what Jacob tells us a little bit further in this text is that Laban said, you know what? I want all the spotted and I want all the speckled, but you can have the streaked. And then he'd see that there were all kinds of streaked goats and sheep. And so he'd say, no, forget that. I'm going to change your wages. And now you get the spotted and I get the speckled and the streaked. No. Now I'm going to change it. And now I get the speckled and you get everything else. So Laban, being the conniving schemer that he is, he's not satisfied with the original deal that he struck because he sees that God is blessing Jacob and he's not blessing Laban. And so he modifies their agreement. He modifies their deal 10 times. That's not just a little bit. That's 10 times. And of course, Jacob's been keeping track. Of course, because we keep track of our wages. We know when our wages change. However, God has not allowed him to harm me, so God has continued to bless me regardless. Verse 8, if he said the speckled ones will be your wages, and then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said the streaked ones will be your wages, then the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and given them to me. In breeding season, I once had a dream. And it's interesting. So Jacob's relationship with God. So remember that God would appear to Abraham and speak to him. But in Jacob's case, God is appearing to Jacob in mostly dreams. And that is still prevalent in the Middle East. God is still appearing to people in dreams today. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, and spotted. So those identified those goats with being part of Jacob's flock. Verse 11, the angel of God came to me in a dream. Jacob, I answered, here I am. Now, if God calls, what's your proper response? Here I am. When God called Samuel as a young boy, and he thought that the old priest was calling him, who was actually asleep. And he ran into the old priest and said, what is it? What do you need? What do you need? He said, I didn't call you. Samuel goes back to bed, and God calls him again, Samuel. He runs to the old priest. He says, yeah, I'm here I am. What do you need? He says, I didn't call you, but maybe this is God talking. Maybe you should answer him. And the next time that God called Samuel, Samuel said, here I am, Lord. And he started an open conversation with young Samuel. Jacob answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, and spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar, and where you made a vow to me. So Jacob's experience, when 20 years before he left home and he was en route to find his Uncle Laban, the very first night that he spent on his own, God appears to Jacob in a dream. Remember? Jacob's ladder. And this is really the first personal experience, or that was really the first personal experience that Jacob had had with Abraham's God and with Isaac's God, and now he becomes Jacob's God. And Jacob marked the significance of that by setting up a pillar, a large stone, set it up as a pillar, and he anointed it, poured olive oil over it to consecrate it. Say, this is Bethel. This is God's house. This is consecrated land. This angel is reminding Jacob of that experience. I am the God of Bethel. There's no question about which God we're talking about. Remember, again, Jacob is in a pagan land, and the Mesopotamians have many gods. So there's no confusion. I am the God of Bethel. I am the God that spoke to you in a dream in that moment, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land. He's telling his wives about this dream and his experience because he's selling them on the plan. He's trying to gain their support for what he's going to do next. Verse 14, then Rachel and Leah replied, do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? They're saying, well, if you're going to take us away from here, we're going to lose our inheritance, aren't we? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Because they're now Jacob's wives. Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Remember that Uncle Laban was a cheapskate, and he was trying to delay having to pay a dowry for his daughters. But as daughters, they were supposed to receive a portion of his estate. Now, every child received a portion. The main portion went to the oldest. Verse 16, surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. Whatever's left. So do whatever God has told you. So they're saying, yeah, okay. Dad's going to get what Dad deserves. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jacob. Let's do this thing. 17, then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels. Because he was wealthy, he had enough camels. I mean, it's quite a bit of camels when you've got 13 kids and 4 wives. That's a lot of camels. And drove all of his livestock ahead of him. So, this is kind of like the cattle drives of the Old West. Yeehaw! And all the sheep and the goats and the donkeys and everything are all in front of them, and they're traveling, riding on the backs of camels behind. Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all of his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods that he had accumulated in Padan Aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. Jacob wants to go home. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. So when Laban was out of the house, Rachel goes and steals Laban's household gods. Remember, Rachel grew up in a pagan family, and she now knows that they're leaving, and she's thinking, yeah, just in case, I better take these with me. But in that culture, if you had the household gods, it meant that you were the head of the household. And what Rachel was doing was stealing her inheritance, because the head of household got to inherit the entire estate. So there's a little more going on here than meets the eyes. It's not just about the household gods, and Rachel is grown up in a pagan family, and she's thinking we're going to need these, or we might need these on our long trip back to Palestine. But she's also stealing her inheritance. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban, the Aramean, by not telling him he was running away. So Jacob just leaves. He doesn't say anything to Uncle Laban. He just goes. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. Crossed the Euphrates River. How was the Hebrew nation formed? It was formed when Abraham was obedient to God and he crossed the Euphrates River. What does the name Hebrew mean? It means people on the other side of the river. What river? The Euphrates. Jacob now becomes part of this group, part of the Hebrew people, part of the people on the other side of the river. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. So Jacob has now gotten a 3-day start on Laban, taking his relatives with him. So he basically amassed everybody that he could muster, and he's taking them with him. Then they're forming a posse and they're going after Jacob and his daughters and his grandchildren. Then God came to Laban, the Aramean, in a dream that night and said to him, "Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad." So God is telling Jacob, do not be a deceiver. Do not connive. Do not cheat Jacob again. Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob, "What have you done? You've deceived me." The deceiver is telling Jacob that he deceived him. "Why didn't you tell me so that I could send you away with joy and singing and music of trumpets and harps? I could throw you the party you deserve, your going away party." Uncle Laban wouldn't have done that. He's putting them up. Even though it was customary to send off people with a party, he wouldn't have ever done that. But he's just setting up his situation. He's trying to make Jacob feel bad, feel guilty in these circumstances. "You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I would have supported you in this. You did a foolish thing. If I would have known, I wouldn't have gotten in your way." Well, there's no evidence to that. He's made Laban continue to work for him for another 6 years. But he's setting up Jacob, trying to put a guilt trip on him. "You've done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you. There are more of us than there are of you. But last night, the God of your father said to me, 'Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.' Now you have gone off because you have longed to return to your father's household." He says, "I get it. I understand. I know you wanted to go home. I get it. But why did you steal my gods?" Jacob's like, I don't know what to say here. I don't know anything about that. Jacob answered Laban, "I was afraid because I thought that you would take your daughters away from me by force." That's why he snuck out, because he thought that Laban would try and keep his daughters there by force. "But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live." Let's take this seriously. I didn't take your gods. I didn't take anything that belonged to you. I didn't take anything that didn't belong to me. Nothing. But I'm going to take this seriously. If you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live. In the presence of our relatives, everyone present, now there's a lot of people there, see for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me. And if so, take it. Now, Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. Oops. So Laban went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and in the tent of the 2 female servants. He's searching, and he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now, Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel's saddle and was sitting on them. So Her camel saddle was now inside her tent, and she's using it as furniture. And she had hidden the household gods under the saddle, and she's sitting on it because she doesn't want to be found out. Laban searched through everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel said to her father, "Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand in your presence. I am having my period. I am in a female way. I am having my period." So he searched, but he could not find the household gods. And this is a little bit of tongue-in-cheek in this text, in what Moses has written here, because a menstruating woman is sitting on top of these household idols. Kind of silly, kind of funny. Talking about how inferior idols are. So he searched, but he could not find the household gods. Jacob was angry. As Laban had searched, he ripped everything apart, and he found nothing. So now Jacob is angry. "How dare you?" "What is my crime?" he asked Laban. "How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you," and remember, he had a 3-day start, so Laban had covered a lot of ground. And they're now on the other side of the Euphrates. They're now in the hill country of Gilead, where Saul lived later. Hundreds of years later, where Saul lived in David's day. "How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here in front of all the relatives in mind. Make sure everybody sees what you found, and let them judge between the two of us. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goat have not miscarried. I've taken proper care of your flocks. Nor have I eaten the rams from your flocks. I didn't personally profit from your flocks. I did not bring your animals that were torn by wild beasts. I bore that loss myself. And you demanded payment for me for whatever was stolen by day and night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the day and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. You were a terrible taskmaster. You gave me terrible living conditions, while I was out working the flocks. I put up with this for 6 years, 20 years in total. It was like this for the 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you surely would have sent me away empty-handed. If I did not do good work for you, if you did not prosper by the hand of my God, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and now the God of Jacob, if that had not been the case, if I had not been profitable to you, you would have sent me home a long time ago. But you benefited from me. But God has seen my hardship and my toil, the toil of my hands. Last night he rebuked you. God rebuked you. The fear of Isaac, right? So that's an interesting phrase. So explaining the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac had not been with me. So the God of Abraham, the fear of Isaac. Fear of Isaac is another way of saying the God of Abraham. So it was the God that Isaac respected. It was the God who Isaac feared. It was the same God that Isaac worshipped. Laban answered Jacob, "The women are my daughters, and the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet, what can I do today about these daughters of mine and about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant." So Laban now wants to make a covenant. Let's make an agreement. If you don't hurt me, I won't hurt you. And you see this pillar? Make another pillar. Make another pillar and a heap of stones. You stay on one side of it, I'll stay on the other. This is a demarcation point. Separates you from me. And in our agreement, you agree to not come around to my side and harm me, and I'll agree to not come around to your side and harm you. They took the stones, they piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap, sealing the deal, right? Shared a meal together. They broke bread together. That is why it is called Gilead, and it is also called Mizpah. Mizpah is Hebrew for watchtower. Because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. If you mistreat my daughters, or if you take any wives besides my daughters, even though no one is with us, remember that God is a witness between you and me. Your God will see, Jacob. Laban also said to Jacob, here is the heap, here is the pillar I have set between you and me. The heap is a witness, the pillar is a witness that I will not go past this heap to harm you, and you will not go past this heap and pillar on my side to harm me. May the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of Isaac, of his father Isaac. I'm going to read that again. So Jacob took an oath in the name of the fear of his father Isaac. Who did Isaac fear? God Almighty. So he's taking an oath in the name of God Almighty. He offered a sacrifice here in the hill country and invited his relatives to a meal. After they had eaten, they spent the night there. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters, and he blessed them. Then he left and returned home. And never the twain shall meet. Right? They part companies. Jacob continues on his journey to Beersheba. Laban goes home to Haran, and never the twain shall meet. And this pillar is a demarcation point that they agreed by an oath that they will not return to harm each other. We've gone over time today, but I wanted to finish out the chapter. Kind of a lot of interesting stuff and a lot of social cultural interaction going on in this chapter. It's kind of interesting to see, and I love it. I love learning about biblical culture, and we're talking about patriarchal times. All right, gentlemen, please have a good rest of your week and go with God.